So I'll tell you, I'm just returning from Bangkok yesterday night. I can see a lot of smiles. Do you resonate wellness now? I also had a river cruise. So, and rightly articulated, before the session started, wellness has a very diverse meaning, perception, and understanding from our organizational context, from individual context. What we'll try to achieve through this discussion is, and we have a power-packed panel here, how we are looking at it from the perspective of measuring it. While we say prioritizing human being, but as you know, human beings are very, very needy, greedy, and wanted in nature. Starting from the invention of wheel, we wanted things to be faster. Then mechanization, we didn't want to do anything, we wanted machines to do for us. Then we wanted to move faster. We invented steel, railways, infra. Then that was not enough, we had electronics. Then further we had internet. You know what is the latest health problem? Digital dementia. If that has got me your attention. And also sleep disorders. Did we hear this 20 years back? No. So with that, what I'm trying to indicate is all of it is commercial activity. When we were doing this, we forgot that it's always a give and take arrangement. So we had spent a lot of time in curative health. You would see medicine advancing a lot in last few hundred years. From physics to chemistry to biochemistry and so on and so forth. Now technology is also there. But well-being as an overall thought or as an overall concept has only propelled or, got a lot of acceleration post-COVID. So that's one of the good things which COVID has, left with us. With that, I will move to our fellow panelists and ask them the right questions. And can I start with you, Srinath?
Sure.
So the question which I have for you is, what role does transparency and communication play in creating a culture of trust that promotes inclusion?
Awesome question. Thank you so much. I represent the new kid on the block, Simple Energy. We are into manufacturing electric vehicles. Coming right back to the topic of trust and communication. Nothing better signifies this imagery when a mother is holding up her hands and a child wants to jump into it, right? That's for me trust in the child about its mother and communication of the mother calling the child into her arms, right? An organization is very similar. It's just a logo, a brand, if not for people. Right? People make up the brand. So when trust and communication are intertwined and thriving as leaders, as policymakers, as HR fraternity, as caregivers concentrating on health and well-being of our people, it's very important to create that aspect of trust. I come from the automotive sector. For me, trust is also a seat belt which enclaps you when you want to drive. Communication is the dashboard telling you about your pace, direction, and your speed at which you drive. If you go fast, your policy is a brake which guides you right and controls you, right? So when you look at it from an aspect of everyday life, 8 hours of our waking up period in a day of 24 hours is spent at work, right? And we ought to thrive, we ought to smile more, we ought to laugh and create something with passion. I think without that, health and well-being will just remain in the presentations and conference hall discussions. I think we ought to bring it alive in our day-to-day actions, in our day-to-day habits, and that for me is the culture that will thrive, right? I personally run with an agenda for the last decade where I call it the more smiles per hour. So I try and bring out more smiles in my people by doing various things, sometimes being a joker too, right? When you fail, you go and clap hands and say, you know what, I failed here. And that's joy of sharing things and saying, you're vulnerable too. Just to give you an example of how trust and communication also impacts the industry that I represent, right? We manufacture electric vehicle scooters. So the basic building block of that is your batteries and the assembly of battery. Each battery is a live bomb, right? I should not be using that for want of whatever, right? But it's quite sensitive in how we have to calibrate it, because at the end of the day, the rider, the customer, the employees that assemble that are all extremely sensitive to this environment. If we do not communicate properly and build the trust in the process of assembling that, there could be lives at stake, right? So a clear communication, a clear display of intent, well defined processes. Mind it, not all the processes are already there, right? We are already, as we navigate, we are also discovering certain phases where we have to calibrate and move ahead. So innovation takes a very steep, very important role in how we calibrate these. So there are 32 different stations within the assembly where batteries are going from the pack state to an assembled state, and each cell has to be calibrated to the discharge and charging points so that the end customer who drives our scooter feels safe. And this is the signs of trust and communication for me, where you are actually seeing it in operational reality, right? So therefore there are multiple instances where we could go back, relook at how we are creating the bond of trust, creating communication channels. Over communication has never been a problem. Maybe I'm talking too much at the cost of time, but no communication is a problem. Imagine driving a car without a seat belt and a dashboard, right? You would still figure it out, but how? You will figure it out by opening your window and asking a fellow, fellow citizen on the road which direction you ought to take. That is how important communication is. What differentiates us is our ability to communicate. I think you should thrive on that. And with that, I think I hand it back to Sudipto. Thank you.
Thank you, Srinath. I think that was a wonderful correlation between automotive and empathy. It's fantastic. I'm sure you would know that why are there brakes in a car? Absolutely. I mean, that's spot on. Brakes allow you to drive faster. Imagine if they weren't there. So that's the way it is. Moving to you, Royran, from the perspective of technology, we all know that now we are appified. We can't find a single mobile without, having multiple apps, let alone one. How can technology be leveraged to enhance well-being and inclusion without alienating or overwhelming employee experiences and their day-to-day function?
Okay. So I'll probably start with the second half of your question, how to avoid alienating employees or making them feel disconnected, right? Because as HR professionals, we know how important buy-in is from our employees and stakeholders, right? So I think you spoke about trust, Srikanth, so I think half my job is done here. I think a lot of organizations miss that critical aspect, right? We force upon our employees apps or certain pieces of technology without informing them how that data is going to be used, right? And there's a lot of bad press around how AI data is collected, how is it going to be used, and there is apprehension in the minds of employees, right? So as HR professionals, I think it is our responsibility that we ensure that before we deploy any piece of technology, we ensure that any doubts that employees have in their minds is clearly clarified and explained. Now coming to the implementation aspect, I think we just saw a presentation about mental health and how apps can be leveraged, right? And I'm sure talking about diverse employees, I'm sure there are employees who don't feel confident or they're not comfortable going to a mental health practitioner or a doctor and sharing, about their illness. And there could be instances where they're trying to self-diagnose, right? Just because they have this apprehension of having to speak to another human being. And we know that AI could play a role in those spaces, right? AI can also play a role in coaching. You have bots now who could coach you and possibly help you point you in the right direction about your diagnosis and point you to the right type of physician that you may need. So there are those applications that I'm sure all of you have heard of. But there's another interesting aspect, and in the morning session, I happened to observe one of the sessions on ergonomics, right? And before COVID, I don't know how many of you recall, but one of the buzzwords was around Internet of Things. And for some reason, that seems to have died down. I don't know where it is in the hype cycle right now. But I think there's still a lot of untapped potential in Internet of Things, especially when it comes to certain furniture that we use. For example, just going back to the ergonomics example, there's a lot of data that can be collected the way you sit. Right? You could have sensors typically on a chair or the furniture that you're using, and that data can be collected, and the data can be used to provide prescriptive analysis or any recommendations to the organization on various aspects. Now, the reason the Internet of Things didn't kick off was that it relied a lot on the cloud, right? So the data is collected at the source, the data is pumped up into the cloud, and the analysis, the compute happens there. But there's this other new technology called edge computing that's gaining prominence. Now, edge computing is a little different in the sense that the compute of the data happens at the device, right? And I'm sure when there's more supply of chips and stuff, that's something that's going to grow in the future. So again, I think those are a couple of applications that come to my mind.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rodin. I think that was very, very interesting. I've heard this term after a very long time, Internet of Things, IoT. But I've also heard IOMT, Internet of Medical Things. I'm sure as HR leaders and experts, you would have heard of point of sale, POS. But when we look at it from a health perspective, it becomes point of care. So how that point of care, as you were alluding to, can come as close as possible to you. It could be a very simple BP monitor, could be a pulse oximeter or things like that. That is on one end of the spectrum. On the other side is continuity of care. So are we aligning the employee journey to ensure that the care is continuous, and hence we are letting the person move from point A to point B? So I think that those are lovely insights. Thank you, Royden. Moving to you, Sharyu. You come from a wellness industry, and you've already seen this from the other side. If you could throw some lights on what are the tools and platform that can help measure and improve employee health and well-being, for the larger group.
Sure. I'll take the point from what you were saying, the continuity of services, right? And I think ma'am also mentioned about physical as well as mental well-being. I would like to take a little more elaborate on that. When you're looking at well-being, it's about physical health, mental health, emotional health, social health, and if I may add also financial health, is what I think most HR would also look at in terms of how you would want to provide well-being to your employees, right? Now, when you're talking about continuity of services, instead of telling you what are the tools available, I'm sure there are plethora of tools available in the market. Visit is one of them. What you would want to look at is, and what I feel, in my experience of talking to HR and what they would want to look at is looking at a platform which kind of connects all these services. There is a linkage where I know, okay, there is certain behavior in a person. If a person is having headaches and talking to a psychiatrist or talking to a GP, for example, maybe there is an element of mental well-being that is required. Maybe that person needs counseling rather than a crocine. Those kind of elements which kind of bring in together, where you see that I'm doing my annual health checkup probably, And from my annual health checkup, I am seeing some sort of data which will show me that I am going to be diabetic or I may be at the risk of cancer. What are the elements that the tool that you are providing to your employees will kind of plug in and tell you that this is what your health is currently at a risk of, and this is what you would need to do, and here is a tool that is available to you, and why don't you use that? This is something that I think we should be looking at in terms of what kind of tools when we are evaluating that brings in all these services under one platform. And obviously there are various other elements, like I was talking to a gentleman in the afternoon, and he very categorically said, that I would want all my services under one platform, be it your insurance, be it your well-being, and that makes sense, right? Because after all, it's also the ROI that I'm talking about. It's about the cost factor that I am talking about. If I am providing medical insurance, I also want to take care of the employee's health. I would want to see that how can I reduce these incidences on the finally. And that's not just about the claim cost that I'm talking about, but it is also on the productivity, the well-being of the employee. And these are some of the elements that you should look at, in terms of the agility of the tool, the integration of the tool, how it can be integrated, one in your current systems, and also in terms of your work culture, that how can it kind of seamlessly fit in. And I think, of course, the performance, that what kind of ROI it will give you. And there are various elements of ROI, I'm sure. We will come to that as well.
Sure. Thank you. I think that's very interesting. I think we had an overdose of tech since morning, but we are talking people. So as Sherry outlined, the technology and the pivotal point of that technology, if it brings a lot of comprehensiveness in terms of health and wellness, I think that'll be very good, and that's a very important point you made. Another thing is, and as I quote from the phrase that you can take a horse to the water but can't make it drink. So what's important is how do you change the health seeking behavior? That's very important. And second is, if you see the evolution back then, 25, 30 years back, there was no benefits. It was only salary. Later, fast forward 10 years, then it became compensation. Then it became compensation and benefits. Now we are talking about center of excellence. Within that, we are talking about, different layers of benefits. Then we are having different leaders. So this is all very positive. This is all giving all the right, messaging for the future, that you take care of wellness, you take care of people. And technology is already there for you to kind of integrate both these aspects. So thank you, Shayu, for that perspective. Moving to you, Dr. Sonal, you're the only doctor in the panel, so thank you for joining us. I would like to ask you, how can organization ensure that employee health, inclusion, and well-being initiatives are sustained over the long term and embedded into the company culture rather than being treated as short-term projects?
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I represent Healthians, and I'm actually from a different background from all HRs here. I'm a medical professional pathologist. So we deal more with the results that come out, and definitely when we go through it in the current scenario of things, what it used to be just illness earlier, in last probably 7-8 years earlier, we were just focusing, like we talk about insurance and all these things. It's all about dealing with illness. It's been now basically being put forward as to focus on wellness. So the moment we try to give a happy moment to an employee and tell that you're well, we'll do things in a better way, it actually takes them more positive and give more positive outlook. So the focus on wellness, and that when we talk of inclusion as well as when we talk of a well-being, like WHO's definition is very clear. We have heard it over like the last lecture, and now Shari also mentioned. It's a composite state of mental, physical, and social well-being, and not just absence of disease or infirmity. The definition we are taught the first day of our medical school. So when we're talking of inclusion and well-being and all those initiatives taking a long-term impact, the main thing is to drive the people to understand the importance of their health. We all know it. We all take it as an individual component. I should be healthy is my problem, not somebody else's problem. But in today's world, when the stress levels are so high and the way we are all proceeding in Indian market, in overall, we are actually the diabetic capital of the world. And we lately, in last few years, post-COVID specifically, we've had cases with such, young, sudden cardiac syndromes happening, deaths happening. Everything is now, if you look at the current scenario, especially from last 2 years, it's all about promoting. They're all apparently fit individuals maximally, and we have heard it all around very close to us. I mean, some of the other close people we've had seen or heard about such instances. So it's about picking those things in the initial stage. So first and foremost is to tell the employee that it is for you and we mean it for you. As an organization, we are for you. That gives them the feeling that yes, I am being looked after by my employer, and the employer-employee relationships gets better. This is the first step to take it in a long-term manner. The second thing is that when you're dealing with their, when they're talking to you, when you make it a little informal by doing, yes, there are methods, you'll do workshops, you'll have displays of things, you will interact with them. But once you start getting their reports, you encourage them, you drive it to your own level. But it doesn't end only at an annual health checkup and that's it. There are things being picked up on those annual health checkup. What happens later? The later is that follow-up and that connect with the employee to bring it to you, and we actually foster that long-term thing that, okay, you've been probably identified with a very common disease, anemia. All of us, very, very frequently, female employees especially, we deal with low hemoglobins, which are routine part of, just a incidental finding as we see. We're generally fine. Or we just come with, I'm not feeling well. A very common thing here, I'm not feeling well. And it turns out to be maybe my vitamin D levels or my vitamin B12 levels are just a little low and I need help. But I just took some medication and I didn't follow it up. So to make it as a long-term strategy and to make it part of employee being as a culture of the organization, the important thing is those kind of follow-ups. And I mean, that we encourage at Healthians. I mean, we are working on those situations wherein we're giving you on the reports the entire, what is the pattern of health that's going on for you and where you are, where are your concern levels and what are your improvement areas, which have already done well. And then HR definitely plays an important role, because if we try, after reviewing all these and bringing the trust of the people by open communication and using the tools, everything becomes as part of the inclusiveness. We are able to give them a guidance into improving their health and make them much more productive and good for the organization. And at the end of it, obviously, contribute to the organizational success as a whole. That's what my take would be. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Sonal. I think bringing that definition, as I know the definition of health was coined in late 50s and well-being was in 2012. So it took so many decades for us to realize that well-being is more important. But thank you for bringing in. There was another important thing which you touched upon is intervention. You could keep doing activities, but if it doesn't tie up and there are no interventions in between, then the transition is not from point A to point B. And if I can use the healthcare sort of terminology, it is called as health transformation journeys. And just to add that disclaimer, so 1 doctor, 2 well-being professionals and 2 HR professionals. So that's the panel to you to bring in the best. But let me quickly give you an example. As a healthcare company, I represent HCL Healthcare. We also thought that, when we go and talk about wellness, it should sound like that we are living it. It should not sound that we are just selling it. So we introduced for our own employees a very special award called as Green Apple Award. And it is a business award. It is rendered during our town halls for people who have shown excellence in their health journeys. You could define it for your organization wherever, at whatever level you are. But what it means is it integrates business strategies and wellness strategy together. Then you are not talking about wellness as topping on the pizza. Right? So thank you, Dr. Sonal. Again, moving back to you, Shrinath, and I'm still stuck at that image of mother and daughter. That was a very nice example. So going back to the point of trust and inclusion, how can organizations maintain trust during times of rapid change, which we are seeing, or uncertainty, as we call it as VUCA, BANI, you have a lot of those terms coming in, especially in relation to employee well-being? How can leaders ensure that inclusion is not just a policy, but embedded into the daily practices and culture of the organization?
Thank you so much. I think very pertinent question. It is also timeless, right? This is in continuum. Two things. When you want your employees to be inclusive, have them participate in every journey, every step, every important milestones of your organization. So we have something called as co-creating policies together. We're a small organization, about 400 odd people, right? So we sit together and think through what policies could benefit us, what direction could benefit us, and that gets into the annual plans year on year. What is it that we can do better, right? So co-creation, irrespective of the outcomes of those policies, the fact that participation brings together minds and binds together their collective will is something that creates a wow, and the journey lasts longer per employee in one single organization. That's very important in terms of co-creating. Two, engagement for us is not just, as HRs are typically, go with that analogy of Rangoli making department, right? So how do you break that mold, right? Engagement activities are very scientific in nature. I thank Shariyu, when she shared earlier. So our whole journey of activities are woven around the health and well-being, and also related to the types of illnesses and the geography that we operate in. Just to break it to you into simpler forms, you have your annual insurances getting renewed every year, right? So it's typically your premium to illness ratio and how much more we have spent and what do we do about it and how much you shell more. So everybody is a loser at the end of the day. We shell more money and then it continues year on year. But we did something different. We said, let's relook at the whole paradigm of data points that are surrounding our illnesses and well-being of our employees and try and analyze and forecast what it could be in the future. And basis that forecast, how do the insurance provider or the service provider and our healthcare partners together journey to bring about engagement strategy in terms of activities which can prevent those recurrences from occurring, right? So we were at something like 18 to 20% of sick leaves, absenteeism related to illnesses year on year. So this, I'm talking about a decade back. So we used technology also there. We used tools which could help us. One was particularly IBM's Watson. Nowadays you get a lot of actuarial tools. So we did a study and then found out these are the patterns of diseases that might recur in the population of employees for a particular set of geography, and we could add more variables as we go by because technology is very fast today. Basis that, we went back and consulted our healthcare partners to say what kind of activities would help create awareness, help create better outcomes in terms of health and well-being, and then wove those into the contracts that we signed with our insurance providers, right? So we had addressed our top line as well as bottom line in terms of increased productivity, performance, reduced absenteeisms. Today we are at single digits, right? And for the providers, their margins were better because they were getting a premium and their outflow was much lesser. Employee and their families yielded the results of being healthy, much healthier and more focused towards whatever they want to achieve in their lives. I think using science, using partners, not just to renew contracts, but take a hard look at your contracts today and see what you can do better on the ground operationally to deliver better outcomes for your organizations. I think this activity is an annual recurrence, so you could all use that tip to go back and see what better can be done. Today, the science of health and well-being is so advanced, as Dr. Sonal was mentioning. You could actually get a lot of science into it and go and change lives for really better. In the earlier session also, we heard about cases where employees were facing severe difficulties and how it was resolved. Today, you could actually make the difference by adopting to science and not just, signing and renewing contracts without a little more homework, right? I think That is for me inclusion, where they feel participative. And this, mind you, health and well-being is the basic in the Maslow's theory, right? If that is not well, nothing is well. There is no pyramid at all, right? It is flat. So therefore, concentrating there and ensuring our people smile more and bond together is very, very vital for the survival of the organization, sustenance and performance and growth. Thank you.
Can I just add in a little here in terms of the inclusion, right? You're absolutely right. You give them on the platform, but I also feel that inclusion would mean that if there is something in for me, and I'm not just talking about your gender or your LGBTQ, your orientation. I'm just talking about right now. My need is that I have a mother-in-law whom I need to take care of. I am a caregiver for her, and I have my son whom I need to kind of give vaccinations or sort of things. So the inclusion, that is there a flexibility for me? Is this relevant for me, the plan that you're giving me, the well-being that you're giving me? And I think when you kind of make this personalization and the customization is when you will also see a higher adoption, and of course in turn that it'll bring more value to the entire piece that you're offering to.
Thank you. So I think that's very insightful. The step one is co-creation. You already have them in the game. Otherwise, it becomes a top-down, which kind of fades away, especially for things which are not perceived or not a high priority, such as a topic like well-being so far. Second, data insights are very, very powerful tool, and I can tell you it's been there for many years. It's just that we are embracing it now. So we use EMR systems. We've been using it from day one. But that's very powerful tool. It can tell you a lot of story about what's happening, and it's also very important, to use the right partners, as you mentioned. That's very important. We don't service our own vehicles, right? We have for a vehicle, for a thing which doesn't have life, you depend on somebody else. Why not on experts to take care of your health? So I think that could be a very, very powerful proposition, and that way you could get the best what's happening in the market, what's happening latest, and also somebody who has that wherewithal to bring in this tool and expertise to stitch the story together for you. Great. Moving to you, Royden, and extending the discussion on that inclusion, what are some key considerations for developing inclusive policies that accommodate the diverse need of employees? And how can flexible work policies enhance both inclusion and employee well-being? And what are the challenges while implementing them?
So I think when it comes to considerations as to how to make sure policies are inclusive, I think one of the most important aspects is identifying and analyzing the demography. Right? I think it's very important, especially if you're a multinational organization. I think particular emphasis needs to be laid on what is the local demographics and what are the needs of the local demography, right? Because it's, especially when it comes to inclusion, right? And if you're a multinational organization with roots in the US or EMEA, where regulation is a lot higher, the typical thing that I've seen most companies do is pick what their home country is doing and try and implement it here. Some of those inclusion policies may not be even relevant to us, right, or to an Asia demography. So I think we need to spend some time, do some analysis on the demography that our GCC or organization is located in, and then use that data to inform the next steps. Right? And I think the second aspect is having a good listening strategy. So I know we all use employee engagement surveys, we use pulse surveys, we do our check-ins as managers, we do town halls. So we collect a lot of data, right? But again, what do we do with that data? Right? It's about using that data to inform the next important step, which is the implementation. So I've seen organizations do a very good listening strategy and then don't follow it up with the implementation, right? And what that does over a period of time is it creates, in the minds of the employees, okay, you're asking me this year on year, but you're not implementing, so I'd rather not answer this survey, right? So I think it's important that the listening strategy and the plan of action are correlated, right? And if you're not able to address everything that you hear while you're listening, at least go back and say why you're not implementing it that year. I think that feedback, it should be constant, it should be consistent. And last part that I want to mention is with the implementation stage. I think we need to be cognizant of everybody who's expressed a need for whatever that benefit might be, right? So, for example, why not have a buffet of benefits rather than a one-size-fit-all, right? So, for example, if I'm a youngster straight out of college, my parents might be working, in which case, forcing me to take an add-on insurance policy for my parents or a medical insurance policy for my parents may not make sense, right? Now, if again on similar lines, offering a one-size-fit-all, kids benefit or elderly care benefit policy may not really help, right? So there are certain demographics that need certain benefits, right? And right now, I think the norm is like it's a one-size-fit-all benefits for all. You like it or you like it or not. Here's what is being forced onto you. But if we could come up with a bouquet where employees can pick and choose what's most relevant to them, and you have like a fixed budget, like for each employee, okay, here's the corpus, right? And here's your portion. You could use that in whichever way format that you want. I think that will be a good solution.
Thank you. I think very interesting. You touched upon demographics, and as Sherry mentioned, personalization. These are very important, aspects when we look at it. But you might want to be a little bit cognizant of the fact that you don't give pocket money to a 5-year-old and tell him, how he wants to spend. So it's important that you kind of create those guardrails while you create a flexible benefit policy, that how do you baseline it, and then at an advanced level, what do you want to give. That way, it'll be having a very good mix and a good use of your wellness budgets, which are anyways constrained, as I understand. So from there, I move to you, Sherry, and keeping a time check, which is already red in color. What is technology's role in promoting inclusion and well-being, and how can organizations track the effectiveness of their well-being and inclusion strategies?
Okay, so I'll take the first part, and I think Ronald and of course even Srinath mentioned about it. Well, of course, in terms of inclusion, right? Now, when I said personalization and customization, so when you're looking at your benefits, the well-being benefits that you're offering, while of course, like you mentioned, that you look at the demographics, you look at what really is required, and yes, very few organizations, and I must congratulate you on what you have done. That is one of the first steps. We all have been saying data is gold, but how are you using it? And I think when you look at all this data in terms of your claims data or the previous year's health data that you would have done some sort of well-being, or if it is even like a new initiative, you do your surveys, you will have to look at some sort of base, and then you create these plans, and I agree with you that you need not do like a one thing fits all. Even with the same sort of flexibility in the program that you give, you may give similar programs, but you give that flexibility and personalization to the employee to kind of choose, okay, I don't want to do it this time. Maybe I do feel positive and I don't really need to speak to a psychologist, but I know maybe I need to speak to a nutritionist, right? These are just, of course, simple examples that I am talking about. Maybe somebody at an age of 24, 25 would not want to do their health checkup, would not want to spend money on their health checkup, but would definitely want to do maybe spend money on the gym. Or it could be, I want to do my tracking of my calories, or do my steps counting. So you have to provide, like I said, when you're choosing your platform, uh, look at something that is going to be flexible and agile enough to suit your entire population. Yes, of course, it cannot be like 100% that I'm going to give all my 10,000 employees something so personalized. But yes, there can be plans that can be created which will suit pockets of your employees. And I think that's where technology, I mean, we are at a good space right now where technology is being backed up, and every day, we are coming up and improvising things, and we are learning things. So that's where I think it's definitely possible. We have seen that happen with one of the largest organizations in the country, and the gentleman was there also in the panel today. They have one of the complex policies that we have seen, and only technology can deliver it effectively. I don't think it's really possible for us to kind of do that manually. So how you kind of personalize, like Sudhir may want something else, Dr. Sonal may want something else, and this is only possible with technology. So I don't think that's there's any doubt on it. I think inclusion is the best way to go ahead, is choosing the right platform and looking at what suits you best. The second aspect in terms of the outcome, right? I think adoption of technology is the way, the answer to you, that what is going to be the outcome of it. You will get all the data possible, what all your employees needing, what are they using, what is the well-being journey that they are having. And I think how you use this data next is where, of course, you have the relevant partners will also help you in terms of how you use this data next. So I think outcome driven could be your data that you're using, the utilization data, the health data. There's so much that is available. I think it's only going to be better in terms of how we use the technology.
A quick point there. I think right now we are just catering to full-time employees in an organization. Again, it's going to change. Like, we're soon going to be having a lot of gig workers, part of the talent economy, right? The whole talent ecosystem. So I think they are going to come in with a different set of needs. So again, scalability is possible only with technology.
Absolutely. I think the very, very interesting perspectives. So we are saying that technology should make it accessible for all of them, and at the same time, different folks, different strokes. You can't be painting it with one color, and then you should have means to provide those output data, so that you can create those plans. So that was very well articulated. Just quickly, referring back to the video, I was hoping we could brought that point where the interviewer asked for a validation to his colleague that have he seen him without a shirt earlier. So in that 2-minute time frame, he did that validation so that he could make out that this was an exception. Similarly, for health and wellness, it's very important that those data insights, give you very strong validation, so that when you go back to business teams, you could prove and you could very, very strongly push for, a 2.0 version of your own strategy. There is one thing which, makes a different you or a newer you. It either on the right side or on the wrong side. What is that one thing? So in the interest of time, let me answer my own question. It is habit. So our own habits, which is followed for a long time, then we call it as a lifestyle issue, or maybe, work-related problem, or so on and so forth. I was just Googling how bad it is to stand and then eat. But we just did it 2 hours back. Having said that, let me come back to the discussion. And for the last question, Dr. Sonal, to you, uh, what role does leadership, which is an important angle here, and employee participation play in their success? And how can HR leaders handle pushback and resistance to well-being initiative from leadership?
Yeah, thank you. So see, based on this question, I mean, unless the leadership drives it, it still remains a personal thing only that, okay, I will look after my health alone. But when we want to drive it through the organization and make it as part of organization vision, mission and goals, and creating the well-being environment for our employees, their leadership role is very, very important. So one is to incorporate things in our policies, and like you just mentioned, Sudeep, that you've already done one exercise that giving awards to people who are working and improving on their health scores. We all know our health status. We may not accept it publicly, but if we are having our health scores and like with the digitization and tools and everything available, our scores can be easily monitored. Now it's not a manual exercise anymore. That helps to incorporate it as part of an overall goal, and leadership, when they drive it, then only this can become successful. It cannot be an internal, just an HR action or just an employee action. Peers definitely, when employees engage within each other as their own peer group participation, looking at them and, your people. I mean, if I look at somebody in my organization and that person is fit and has probably lost few kgs of weight, I am definitely driven. So the employees together along with the leadership can do it. And yes, including it as part of, again, everyone has a thought process to it, as part of your monitoring of your KPIs, just to make sure that there is an improvement, not just as a primary thing, obviously, for your appraisal, but as an add-on points, then definitely give them a boost to take it up. Overall leadership initiatives sometimes are very, very important. I mean, there was a situation we've had in our organization where we did health checkup for some company. It was a young organization, and we found that 35% of the young people had a pre-diabetic status. And then when the leadership took interest and it was evaluated that what was the reasons, and there were certain things which were picked up, the food habits there, the food was being served in the organization. And it was on the third floor, people used to go to have the food, and there used to be a sweet every time in the food. So certain measures leadership took to remove that sweet thing, which people may not have liked. And also they ensured that people will only take stairs, and 3 months re-evaluation made the change. So had it not been driven by a leadership together along with employee engagement, it wouldn't have happened. So that's how we all can, make it inclusive. And like you said, the HR, going and getting a pushback. Well, ultimately, all of us talk on the simple thing in business, return on investment. If you have healthy employees, you definitely have return on investment. So it's just that we have to put it across, like you said, exclusive data together combined with what is to be presented. So for a younger generation, maybe I need to just do probably a little amount of tests. I don't want to do an annual health checkup containing a battery of investigations. I just need to do probably a basic thing of a glucose or a cholesterol, which is what is disturbing our younger generation right now. So just 3-4 tests won't cost much. When I'm dealing with my, senior colleagues that, they are touching beyond 40s and all, where I need to add, like people are, we all are seeing cancers coming up so fast and all around, and therein we need to invest. But by that time, your employees have also grown to a stature where that investment will definitely make sense. So it's just how we present, again, like, Sudhir mentioned, making use of that data insights and presenting it will definitely stop those kind of pushbacks, and we will be able to, heed our leaders to, take part in it and support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's very clear. Leadership wants proof. So please provide them. And yeah, they want proof of ROI. They want proof of ROV, if you call it, return on value. But yes, that's the point, that if you are looking at your wellness strategy, one, it has to resonate with business, if I have to sum it all. Second, there has to be a participation from all segments, including leaderships, manager, and definitely employee. So, has to show that initiative towards those programs.